Hi, my name's Eric Engle, and I'm happy to be back with you today on the Appalachian channel, courtesy of Anthony Underwood. And today I'd like to talk to you about West Virginia's senior U.S. Senator, Joe Manchin. Yes, that Joe Manchin that you've been hearing so much about. Senator Manchin is problematic, to say the least, and we in Appalachia are very acutely aware of this. Especially us West Virginians, we are very aware of the problems that our state's senator presents in the U.S. Senate. Folks like myself have been acutely aware for some time that Senator Manchin's stance on the filibuster is not tenable. It's just not tenable. We know that it's not realistic. We know that the filibuster is a Senate rule that is not constitutional. It did not originate with the U.S. Constitution. It actually was created by Aaron Burr in the early 1800s when he presided over the Senate. And for a long time, it was a relatively unused, relatively little known Senate tool to sort of bring debate to a stop and to allow a senator to hold the floor and not relinquish the floor and stall things out until such time as a vote to invoke cloture, which is how you end a filibuster, was held. And it used to be that 3/4 of the Senate, 75 senators out of 100, had to vote to invoke cloture. And then that rule was changed in part by Senator Robert Byrd, who preceded Manchin in his seat, and as you probably know, was a West Virginia senator for 6 decades. The rule was changed to where 3/5 of the Senate could invoke cloture and stop a filibuster, which is 60 votes. Well, now today, the filibuster has been abused to an enormous degree. Senator Mitch McConnell in particular, when President Barack Obama was presiding in the White House, when he was the minority senator, Senator McConnell decided, as the minority Senate leader, to abuse the filibuster, use it something like 700 times throughout the tenure of Barack Obama. It was unprecedented, and really, abuse of the filibuster does go back to sort of the Newt Gingrich days in the early 1990s, when Republicans took control of Congress for the first time in 93 and 94. But before that, it wasn't just abused in the 21st century, but it was abused to an enormous degree starting in Obama's tenure, when Senator Mitch McConnell became Senate Minority Leader of the Republican Senate caucus. And it's been abused to an enormous degree ever since. The threat of it just puts everything to a stop. So it is not a way to get bipartisan legislation done. It is not a way to get anything done. It is a stall tactic by a minority party to make sure that a majority party can't govern. And the thing is, Democrats have the slimmest of majorities right now in the U.S. Senate. It is literally 50-50 in the U.S. Senate, but Vice President Kamala Harris can come in, preside over the Senate as the vice president, and cast a 51st tie-breaking vote. So they do technically have a majority. But that majority depends on Senator Joe Manchin, which is why he's so popular right now, why everybody's talking about Senator Manchin. So if he's that critical tie-breaking vote that enables the Democrats to get things done, which he is, what we realize is that we've got to ditch the filibuster or change the way that the filibuster is conducted if we're going to get anything done. And Manchin and the Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema refuse to do that. Now, Senator Sinema will probably be successfully primaried in her state next session. She's a first-term senator, and I think Arizona Democrats have had enough of her. But Senator Manchin's been around, and he'll continue to be around until at least 2024. And he's talking about running again at that time. He has not ruled out that possibility. So something's got to be done here. And us West Virginians, we know that. We know what a problem this is. We know that we just can't get anything done like critical democracy reform like the For the People Act, or critical infrastructure legislation led by the likes of the Thrive Act that I talked about before, or critical legislation like the PRO Act for unions or the Equality Act, especially for the LGBTQ plus community. We can't get anything done with that filibuster standing in the way, and we know that Senator Manchin is what's standing in the way of that. But there are some other problems with Senator Manchin as well that are less talked about. For instance, when it comes to debating infrastructure, Senator Manchin is one of the sponsors of a bipartisan, piece of legislation that is an infrastructure bill that runs at a cost of between $500 and $600 billion and cuts out a great deal of climate-related change that we desperately need. In fact, when the organization Friends of the Earth looked at this bill, they found that 70% of the investment in this infrastructure bill goes to dirty fuels, the expansion of fossil fuels, when only about 30% would go to investments in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and long-term sustainability. So that piece of legislation just isn't going to work to begin with. But then you have a $3.5 trillion piece of legislation that Democrats want to pass using budget reconciliation, which I spoke about in my last session, which would not require any Republican votes to pass. But Senator Manchin is once again that key vote where that legislation comes into place. And we can't do it without him. And he knows it. So he's really using and abusing that by knowing it. And so, but the problems go beyond that, because one reason that Senator Manchin is not particularly interested in working on the mitigation of global climate change and addressing the global climate change issue is that he makes money from coal. I'll say that again. He still makes money from coal. There is a conflict of interest, and most of the media, especially some of the big corporate outlets, don't want to talk about it. They avoid it altogether. But he does. In 1998, Senator Manchin started a coal brokerage called InterSystems that sells coal to local coal plants for usage. Since 2010, when Senator Manchin took Senator Bob Byrd's seat and then was elected to a full term in that seat in 2012 and elected again in 2018, since that time, he has made approximately $4.5 million from InterSystems. He does not directly oversee it. Since he was elected to national office, his son has overseen it, but he and his wife still profit from InterSystems, which again sells coal to local coal power plants for use. And he started that brokerage in 1998. So for 23 years, he's been making money on InterSystems. And since he's been a U.S. Senator for about 11 years, he has been making money on InterSystems to the tune of $4.5 million. He benefits from coal. There is a direct conflict of interest. And it's not that. It's not just that, I should say. It is his idea of what the future should look like. So Senator Manchin supports something called the Appalachian Storage Hub. And the storage hub is actually something that would take place up and down the Ohio River Valley, and it involves more oil and gas pipelines and compressor stations and oil and gas infrastructure. And the reason they call it a storage hub is it also involves storing natural gas byproducts like ethane and butane in underground salt caverns under and around the Ohio River. So these highly combustible derivatives of drilling for natural gas, like ethane and butane, would be stored in underground salt caverns under and around the Ohio River. The Ohio River being a 983-mile drinking water source for 5 million people. Okay? And so they want to store these things underground. And they want to store it in places like in Southeast Ohio and along the West Virginia border and the border with Kentucky and all of this, that have been turned into Swiss cheese by fracking. Okay, we already have all these fracked wells in these areas. We have storage tanks in these areas that store the byproducts of fracking that are known to be carcinogenic and highly radioactive and highly dangerous. And we even store them in above ground storage tanks. But this area has been fracked to Swiss cheese. And they're saying that they want to put this storage hub in these underground salt caverns under and around the Ohio River and build all of this infrastructure. And what they want to do is be able to recover those substances like ethane from the storage caverns and send them to facilities that they want to build called cracker plants. And the cracker plant, it's called that because it literally cracks the ethane molecule to produce the products needed for plastics production, like polyethylene. Okay? So the whole point of this is to use these natural gas byproducts to create more plastic. Well, what else do we know about plastic? Even here in Appalachia, we know that the world is ubiquitously contaminated with plastics. Okay? It is in the furthest reaches of the world. It has been found in the North Pole. It has been found in Antarctica. It has been found at the depths of the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean. It has been found in the Himalayas. There are even parts of this country in the United States and the Rocky Mountains in states like Colorado where we have found that it rains plastic. Microplastics and nanoplastics, these tiny little plastic molecules, plastic entities that don't break down any further, are literally in the water table, in the water cycle, and it is raining plastic. Okay? One study out of Australia showed that human beings consume, on average, we ingest or inhale, mostly this study focused on ingesting, a credit card's worth of plastic every week. So according to that study that was conducted in Australia with the World Wildlife Fund, we are consuming a credit card's worth of plastic every week. Plastic is everywhere. And it's everywhere because as a substance, it's highly durable. Okay, that's what we produced it for. We wanted it to be flexible, durable. We know that it has endless uses, but it is a synthetic material that just does not break down. It is just forever. It just sticks around. And Senator Manchin is saying that despite this crisis, and despite us not knowing exactly how plastics, when we inhale and ingest them, affect our bodies, we do know that they can screw around with different balances of hormones in our bodies. They can be hormone disruptors, okay? We do know that there are some negative effects to inhaling and ingesting these things, but there's a lot more studying to be done. And we also know about the ocean wildlife that this kills. Whales ingest it, sea turtles ingest it, other creatures ingest it thinking it's food. Their stomachs fill with it and they pop, and we have found them dead and stranded on beaches around the world. We know that this is in our food systems, in our water cycle, that it is ubiquitous in our environment and it's not breaking down. We can't get rid of it, in some cases, for thousands of years. And recycling is a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid. It is a temporary fix to a very long-term problem. Now, we should be using more recycled plastics instead of creating new, what they call virgin plastic. And there is legislation out there to help us do just that, called the Break Free from Plastics Pollution Act. And we should be doing that at the same time that we engineer alternatives to plastic. The thing about plastic is we could ditch 40% of the plastic in the plastics market today. They're called single-use disposable plastics. I'm sure you've heard of them, like your water bottles, your straws, your things like that. We could be ditching these things today, and it's 40% of the plastics market. And for the rest of it, like plastic used in hospitals or in the construction of cars or cell phones, we need to be engineering biodegradable alternatives to these polymers. And there are studies going on that show promise. Hemp shows a tremendous amount of promise for replacing those hard-to-replace plastics. But the last thing we need in the Ohio River Valley, where I'm at in the mid-Ohio River Valley, the last thing we need in Appalachia is the production of more plastics and petrochemicals in the valley to pollute and contaminate our air, our water, to contribute to climate change, which these things do at every part of their life cycle. And that's what Manchin sees as the future of the Ohio River Valley. He wants an Appalachian storage hub. He wants to build out plastics and petrochemicals to keep the fossil fuels going. And he thinks that to address climate change that we can talk about carbon capture and storage. No, carbon capture and storage is unproven technology. People have been working with carbon capture and storage since at least the 1970s. And it's just like nuclear fusion. It seems like the technology is always another 10 to 15 years off. We can't capture a significant amount of carbon out of our atmosphere and remove it, or capture carbon at the source pollution site like coal plants to efficiently enough and in large enough quantities to prevent climate disaster. It cannot be done. It's been shown for 50 years. It cannot effectively, efficiently, or affordably, or practically, realistically be done. So that is a false solution that people like Manchin are pushing because it keeps fossil fuels operating. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit sweaty today. It's hot outside and I can't run my air conditioner in this room or it'll drown out my voice. But I've been talking at you for 15 minutes here. I want to wrap this up. We know in West Virginia that Senator Manchin is a problem. And I want you to know that in West Virginia, we're fighting for better. We're fighting for more. We're not just taking Senator Manchin and saying, well, this is what we want from you. I know people from outside of the state say, hey, 2/3 of you voted for Trump in both 2016 and 2020. You'd be right. 2/3 of the voting population here did do that both years. But here's the thing. There are about 250,000 of us, over 200,000 of us in the state of West Virginia who voted, who were amongst the voting population in this state, who did not vote for Trump, who only voted for people like Joe Manchin because the alternative, Patrick Morrisey, in the most recent election in 2018, was so bad. And we just couldn't imagine how bad things could get if we sent Patrick Morrisey to the US Senate. But we're not prepared to do that again. Folks like me, we're not going to vote for Manchin again. We're just not in the primaries, not in the generals. We will not support this man. Folks like me and different people I'm in organizations with will not support this man in 2024. We need better. We deserve better. And we want you to know from West Virginia, from here in Central Appalachia, that we are fighting for better. We hear you. We know what a problem he is with that filibuster and getting the legislative agenda of the Democratic Party passed in Congress, or a more progressive leftist legislative agenda passed. We know what a problem he is with ditching fossil fuels and meeting the climate crisis head on in a meaningful way. And we are here to say no more. We won't tolerate it from this guy anymore. We hear you, we're with you, we stand in solidarity with you against this person. So know that we're fighting. Know that his constituents who can vote for or against him or not for him at all are fighting. And we're not going to give up. We know how important this is, and we are organizing and mobilizing, and we are not going to give up. So don't forget, we're here. And we're not all Trumpers. And we're not all right-wingers. We're not all corporatists and neoliberals and people who feed the ego of people like Joe Manchin. We're here. We're in the trenches, and we're fighting. Thank you.